talk about mindfulness as if it's universal. Just breathe deeper, just meditate longer, just stay present. But what if the path to peace was already written in your cells? What if your nervous system, your emotional triggers, even your daily energy rhythms are wired differently from mine? Now, in today's conversation on the Mindful Living podcast with your host, Sana, we are going to explore a perspective that blends hard science with human spirit, the role of genetics in mindful living. Sounds interesting, right, listeners? So, let me introduce my guest to all of you. Our guest didn't set out to become a pioneer in holistic genetics, but her journey of relentless curiosity transformed not only her own life, but the lives of countless others who were told they would simply never heal. And together, we are going to ask, how can mindfulness become more personal, more precise, and more powerful when it is designed for your DNA? So, introducing my incredible guest listeners, Julie Alsaker. So, Julie, welcome to the show. I'm really excited for this discussion.
Thank you so much for having me, Sana.
Okay. First of all, our listeners, they'll be very surprised because until now, as I was mentioning in the intro, we talk about mindfulness with regards to breath work, meditation, um, cultivating presence, self awareness. But then here we are going several layers deeper to the most basic core, to the genetics, to the cells, to the DNA. So, uh, uh, how does genetics, play an important part into this? Because Julie, mindfulness, many listeners they think it as a practice of willpower. So, yeah, what's your thought?
Well, I love that this show is primarily looking at obviously with the name mindfulness, because
Mm-hmm.
that with my clients, with people that are terribly sick that might even be on their deathbed, we start with mindfulness. Yes, we get the genetics ordered, but that takes time. And so until we have that information, we start with mindfulness because it impacts how your genes behave so strongly. So, one of the
Mm-hmm.
mindfulness practices, for example, is gratitude. When you start practicing gratitude, it shows up in your blood work by your genes working better for your immune system within 4 days of doing gratitude work. So, our mind and body are so in tune with each other that when we talk about being holistically well, we want
Mm-hmm.
to not just pour into our energy and our mindfulness and our ability to be present, but that awareness of how our body is feeling, how it's functioning, how the direction in which it's going, and being
Mm-hmm.
mindful of the things we're actually experiencing, because most people tend to justify or rationalize symptoms rather than taking action to make a pivot in what you're doing in your life, what you're doing for your biology. And genetics will help us make that pivot more easily and effortlessly. But it starts with being mindful and knowing I've got to make a change because when I stand up, my knees hurt. That's
Mm-hmm.
not just old age, and I'm using air quotes right now, I do that a lot, little bunny air quotes. That's not just old age. When a person that's in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s is saying, "Oh, I can't do this because of old age, I'm just getting older," I like to say, "For now," because those things almost 100% of the time can be reversed because I've seen it every time.
That's very powerful, Julie. That's very powerful. And um, I think more than the biology, it's kind of an acceptance that we have made as humans, especially in women, that it's just old age. I'm now in my midlife, so this is bound to happen. So it's natural. It's nothing to worry about. but
Correct.
fact that these symptoms can be reversed. We don't have to suffer. There was one particular quote that now I'm getting reminded that pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice. And I think we all have that right to make that choice, Julie. That's what I believe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's a beautiful quote. And you use the word normal. And I think that is one of the most powerful mindsets that different cultures have adopted. Except normal doesn't mean healthy, normal means repeated. So when
Mm,
there's pain and fatigue and anxiety, these might be normal within a culture, but that is still the body waving a red flag. So what we normalize, we tolerate. What we honor, we can transform. And that's where the mindfulness and the genetics come together because when I get a client's DNA, I'm able to
mm,
see that, yes, they might have a more difficult time with inflammation than the person next to them. But that
mm.
information doesn't mean, oh, you're destined to be inflamed the rest of your life and have so much pain. No, that is the information that we gather to say, how do we support this area of your biology in a way that it doesn't become your destination? It's, I always say, genetics is not your destiny, it's your strategy.
Lovely. That's a very, very inspiring quote, Julie. Superb, superb. And some might argue that bringing genetics into mindfulness it risks making people over reliant on science instead of cultivating inner awareness. I mean, have you encountered any such kind of skepticism around this? And if not, let's say if you do, how would you respond to it?
I think that's a really good point, and it there has been I'm in America, and in America, the vast majority, we're talking upwards of probably 99% of people only rely on, and again, air quotes, "the science," mainstream medicine. That is the prevalent, respected pathway. And
Mm,
so when, we're bringing in mindfulness as a healing modality and then adding genetics, I think the gut reaction of people that know that that is not the end all be all, they don't want the two to connect because there's a lot of really unfortunate things that happen over in the mainstream medicine and the mainstream science, and they don't want to see that the energy and this peacefulness and over in the mindful area of healing,
mhm,
it's almost like they don't wanna muddy the water with that area that has been so negative, because I've been a naturopath for about 20 years, and I can tell you as a naturopath, as a traditional naturopath, not a licensed naturopathic doctor, but as a traditional naturopath using centuries of wisdom, I have been just bombarded with criticism from doctors and from people saying you're not a real doctor. So anytime anything from their world enters our world, there's that immediate resistance because you've treated us badly and you make us feel, to be frank, like we're dumb and you're right
mhm,
and we're wrong. And yet, to deny access to information that is literally our body.
mhm,
I'm not using genetics in a medicinal way. I'm looking at how I can support my cells. That's part of my nature. It is literally learning more about my nature. And when I'm learning about my nature, that is the most intuitive thing I can do.
Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. I 100% agree. Um, and it's a very powerful point that you made here. And Julie, you also talk about the nervous system as being deeply influenced by our DNA. I can definitely, I mean, even if I don't have a single iota of an idea about this, but I can make some semblance because it's through just my, individual experiences. Um, how do genetics impact our ability to self-regulate stress or find calm? Does it come from the patterns that we see in our parents or in our siblings, or is it completely different?
It is completely different. Even two siblings, their genetics can be vastly different because maybe one predominantly gets more um, impactful genetics
Mm.
from their mother, and the other one gets the mother's least impactful genetics. So it's going to be so incredibly individualized. And
Mhm.
what we know now through the evidence that is available to us is that people fundamentally, biochemically experience stress in a different way. One person is biochemically able to handle stress really well, whereas the next person's, and I'm going to get into some sciencey stuff here, but I'm going to keep it super high level. In our brain, we have chemicals, neurochemicals, and
Okay.
these chemicals are different recipes for different emotions. That's how we experience emotions. When we have joy, when our smile comes on, and you just think of a joyful moment right now. Picture being out and hiking in nature, your body feels a certain way.
Yep.
If we were to imagine something negative, which I'm not going to go there because I don't want my body to feel it, you're going to physically feel different. And that is because of the recipe of chemicals in our body. Now, some people, their body does a beautiful job making they're pro chefs, right? They are the Michelin star restaurant that you want to go to. There are other bodies that are White Castle, and for the love, you don't want their recipes because it is not good. If you guys like White Castle, I apologize, but I don't. And so the idea being, if a person isn't aware that their body's quote unquote recipes aren't as easy and effortless as the next person, then they're not only going to be struggling with how their body biochemically experiences stress, but they're also going to feel crazy. Why are we experiencing the same thing, but I'm completely unable to regulate my heart rate and my nervous system? I can't get it to calm down. And I can't get over this. Why can't I get over this when you're getting over it so well? And yes, the mindful stuff, mindfulness part of it is incredibly impactful on how our biology is able to handle things. And we are still biology. So I'm a couple genes that we can look at. If a person, for example, has what's called a COMT, and the letters
Mhm.
that they have, the alleles, are AA, that person, when they have the neurochemicals, they are supposed to be processed at a particular speed, and then they are supposed to be, the body breaks it down and eliminates them. The person with the AA letters, they're called slow COMT, slow metabolizers, which means the chemicals that they have are not going to be processed fast, which can lead to a backup in chemicals, so an overwhelm of chemicals, and they
Mhm.
are going to experience more anxiety. They're going to experience a more difficult time managing their nervous system. And if they know that, then, for example, quercetin, which is a beautiful natural substance, quercetin is something that can trigger anxiety in a person with a COMT-AALL. It doesn't, they're not broken. Quercetin isn't bad. It's just at this unique person, this unique combination, they might want to pay attention to that when they're having anxiety, that all their meditation and everything isn't taken care of. Then they can look at the biological level, what's going on. I avoid raw onions because raw onions have quercetin, and it helps my nervous system because I have a COMT-AALL.
Hmm. That that is interesting, Julie. I, I'm not sure. I mean, in psychology, we have often discussed all these scenarios with respect to psychology or um, our body's circadian rhythms or hormonal balance. But this goes so deep, so deep. I'm not sure whether we have something like genetics and psychology in the conventional education or studies, but this is so interesting. And Julie, can this be reversed, or it's kind of that we have to accept that this is how genetically it's a blueprint, so I have to embrace it and I have to go with it. I mean,
Yeah,
let's say. Mhm.
your genetics are your genetics. They don't change. There are instances in literature where there's rare cases of an extreme either physical or emotional trauma where there's been a change, but that is
Mhm.
incredibly rare and at this time not necessarily understood. So,
Mhm.
I like to look at it as my genetics compared to the hundreds of tests I've looked at, I personally have what we would call bad genetics. I am not a person that is going to naturally be an athlete that easily stays super fit. I am not going to naturally fight infections and illnesses easily. I'm not going to naturally do all these things. Except that now that I know, I live in a way that supports them, and therefore, I am a fit person. I don't ever get sick, ever. I grew up very sick. In fact, the doctors, we saw many. After I almost died at 11 from pneumonia, the doctors told my parents, "She is just always going to be sickly. Expect that." And then I went to natural healing without my genetics. I
Mhm.
was able to heal. I was able to be well, but I had to work so hard at it. Then, years ago, I got my genetics, and now I'm still well, but I work less hard because now I know where to focus my attention.
Wow. Wow. I think this is such a great deal of awareness that our genetics brings to us. I think this almost reframes healing from um, shame to strategy. Like understanding the why
Yeah.
instead of blaming ourselves for overreacting.
Yes. There has not been a single person that I've gone through their genetics within my office here that
Mhm.
hasn't at some point in time cried because it's so freeing to say, "Oh, that's why." I'm a very intuitive, very deeply feeling person, and
Mhm.
I as a child, again, it was, "Wow, Julie, you're so sensitive. You're overly sensitive. You need to stop crying so much," etcetera, etcetera. Now I know my genetics, and now I go, "I am. I am designed to my cells. I am designed to be a deeply feeling person, and I am validated by that." And for the person who has struggled with weight their entire life, and everybody says, "Oh, just eat less and work out more." And that person has done that for years with no results. And then they see their genetics and they go, "This is how I am designed. And
Mm.
it's okay. And I'm okay." It's so validating. And when you have validation, then you are free to be you because you're not doing this weird comparison thing that we're taught every moment of our life as we're growing up in our culture. We're it's always looking out at other people and am I normal? Do I fit? Well, as soon as we have our genetics, we're not normal. We're us. We're
Mhm.
unique. We're beautifully unique. So it's a very freeing process.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so empowering. So empowering, Julie. Um, but here, once again, I would like to bring a bit of nuance here. Now, um, in terms of emotional triggers, uh, we we um we see, maybe someone with a very bad temper, or very you know dramatic, and sometimes, in social perspective, I'm putting this, it can be sometimes very tricky. So, is it justified to say that, okay, that person is designed like that, so there's no possibility of changing, and uh, and the person himself or herself will also say that this is how I am designed, I cannot change myself. So, I mean, how do we balance this awareness with accountability as well?
Yes, beautiful question. And I will say there that genetics are part of our holistic wellness,
Mm-hmm.
and they are an explanation, not an excuse.
Exactly. Right.
So, if you are a person that loses your temper, yes, we can look at your genetics and say, yeah, you react to stress less well than the next person. However, your behavior is your responsibility. So I like to look at triggers not as being setbacks, but triggers being teachers. It is their responsibility to recognize that this is triggering me. I'm getting angry. And then they get to do the emotional work because our nervous system is going to repeat old patterns until it feels safe enough to do something new. So when we're tracking repetition of that behavior, they get to emotionally figure out the root cause. The genetic part of it, yes, they can help not have that huge spike in the
Mhm.
feeling per se. They might be able to a good explanation, I think, might be like a roller coaster. You have super high highs and super low lows. When we can support the biology, we can raise that bottom, right? So when you're hitting the lows, you're not hitting as low. However, you don't have to get on the roller coaster. You can do the emotional work and stay off the roller coaster instead of participating in drama.
Mm. Once again, I really love that, we can make triggers our teachers instead of setbacks. That is really, really such a crucial takeaway for all of us, Julie, for every one of us. And then before we wrap this important conversation, talking about the future of mindfulness and genetics, which I personally believe is absolutely revolutionary. Um, where do you see this field heading in the next decade? I mean, we have seen yoga, meditation becoming as common as, exercising. Where do you see the future of personalized genetics?
Well, it is incredibly fast growing right now in the longevity community, in the biohacking community. The difference is primarily it is being used more for people that lean to the mainstream
Mm,
approach of healing, and they're using it mostly for here's your genes, here's the supplements you need versus
mm,
holistic genetics, where it's saying, here's your genes. Okay, how do we work with you uniquely to support your mind, your body, your soul, your relationships, your goals, your dreams, your ability to envision and imagine an incredible future? That's holistic, right? It's not just about, oh, you don't you need more choline than the next person, go take choline. That's important, yes, and it minimizes the impact that having our genetics in our
mm,
hand can have. So the holistic genetics field is it's a term that I coined because I haven't found anybody doing this approach that I take, which is I call it the Genius Method. Genius spelled technically incorrectly because it's
right.
GENE based on genetics, but that is encompassing everything from awareness, emotional alchemy, biology, nervous system, identity. It's encompassing all of it. I hope, my dream is that the idea of using genetics holistically grows wildly because everyone that's using it for being part of a holistic practice, part of mindset, part of the not just fitness and food and supplements, but part of an identity and a being, everybody doing that is seeing better health and better joy than they ever could have imagined. So, because I am the pioneer of this instead of just the food and supplements,
Mhm.
uh, I am just trying to get out there as much as I can to share this information. I'm finishing what will be my 5th book, but it will be my first book on the Genius Method, showing people exactly how to take this approach, get their DNA tests, and on their own be able to understand how it suits them. So, my dream is that everybody would know this and everybody would want this because it is the easy button. Like I said, I worked twice as hard for half the results for most of my life. Now it's easy and effortless. I get to just be me.
So inspiring, Julie. So inspiring. And I absolutely believe in your conviction, in your journey, and the insights that you have shared. They're so useful, and because they really, really, our genetics, our genes, our DNA, they're so much help us in understanding who we actually are, not just from the emotional or soul perspective, but from our, origin, our structural perspective. So it's such a fundamental block. I mean, we all have studied genetics in our school. So personally, it really, really is such a huge interest to me. And I'm really thankful that I got to have this discussion with you. Um, I'm really bullish on this, that the word will definitely get out there, and people will have access to this. People can make choices in there. They have the right to make those choices. So thank you so much for doing this, Julie, for all of us. And if our listeners, they would like to connect with you, explore more about your upcoming book and the wonderful resources that you're sharing for this, what would be the easiest way?
The best thing to do is follow me on Facebook. It is the place where I am most active, and it's facebook.com slash julie.alsaker. Or you can just look up Julie Alsaker on Facebook and you'll see me.
Super, super. I'll make sure to have all the details and the links in the show notes for our listeners. And Julie, thank you so much, because what we have uncovered today is that mindfulness isn't fitting ourselves into a box. It is about designing a practice as unique as our DNA. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
So, to all the listeners out there, our genes don't define our limits, they illuminate our pathways. And when mindfulness walks in hand with science, peace stops being a distant idea. It becomes our natural state. May this conversation inspire you to honor your own design and remember that mindful living isn't about becoming someone else, it's about becoming more deeply yourself. With that, this is your host, Sana, signing off. Thank you.